Daniel chapter 2. Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr. was a doctor. As such, he was very interested in the use of ether. In order to know how his patients felt under its influence, he once had a dose administered to himself. As he was going under, in a dreamy state, a profound thought came to him. He believed that he had suddenly grasped the key to all the mysteries of the universe. When he regained his consciousness, however, he was unable to remember what that insight was. Because of the great importance he thought this would be to mankind, he arranged to have himself given another dose of ether again. This time he had a stenographer present to take down this great thought. The ether was administered, and sure enough, just before passing out, the insight reappeared. He mumbled the words, the stenographer took them down, and he went to sleep confident in the knowledge that he had succeeded. Upon awakening, he turned eagerly to the stenographer and asked her to read what he had uttered. Anybody want to guess what he said? What was this great thought? It's going to change the course of mankind. This is what the statement was. The entire universe is permeated with a strong odor of turpentine. That's his great thought. You ever had a dream and you didn't know what it meant? What's the last thing you dreamed? You know what the last thing I dreamed was? No, seriously, tell me, what's the last thing I dreamed? What's so funny about that? You can't tell me what my dream is? What if I wanted you to tell me what my dream meant? And you can't even tell me what my dream was. If you can understand those things, you can understand what we're going to talk about today in Daniel chapter 2. I hope everybody has turned there. I hope you've read Daniel chapter 2 in preparation for today, because for the first time, I am not going to read Daniel chapter 2. I am going to trust that you have read Daniel chapter 2. It is 8 verses long. It was 49 verses long. That's a long... I don't even know if I could read that whole thing, as my throat is feeling this morning. Can you tell? It's a little higher than normal. I'm going through puberty now, so that's fun. So I'm not going to read this whole thing of Daniel chapter 2. I'm just going to trust that you've read it and that you're familiar with it, at least on some level, because we're going to charge through this thing like a drinking out of a fire hydrant. That is our custom. And I hope that you're going to be able to keep up and play along, even if you're at home. So today we're going to look at Daniel chapter 2. Today God wants you to see the dream for the ages. God wants you to see the dream for the ages. And as we start to look at this dream, somebody's going to have a very particular and peculiar dream. Who is it that has this dream? Is it Daniel that has the dream? No, it's not Daniel that has the dream. Who has the dream? What's his name? Can you say it? I can't wait for somebody to say this name. I say it all the time. I'm waiting for somebody else to say this name. Nebuchadnezzar. I love that name. If we ever had another one, it would be Nebuchadnezzar. Hayden and Nebuchadnezzar. I love it. So we're going to start to look at this dream of Nebuchadnezzar. And as we start to look at this dream, we're going to notice that Daniel chapter 2 in this dream was going to be broken down into 3 different steps. This first step we're going to look at is verses 1 through 13. Nebuchadnezzar is going to issue a decree. He's going to tell us that there was this dream, and he's going to have a specific decree as it relates to this dream. Second step, verses 14 through 45. This is where the bulk of the thing is at this morning. First step is the decree of Nebuchadnezzar, and then secondly is actually the dream. We're going to look at what the dream is. We're going to look at the interpretation of the dream and how does all that fit together. And finally, the third step, the first one is the decree and then the dream of Nebuchadnezzar. And then finally, the decision of Nebuchadnezzar, verses 46 through 49. So, one more time. 1 through 13 is the decree of Nebuchadnezzar. 14 through 45 is the dream of Nebuchadnezzar. And then 46 through 49 is the decision of Nebuchadnezzar. So, trusting that you've read this and you're familiar with this, we're going to just dive right in. And it goes like this. I'm going to read a few verses here to get us started. Now, in the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, and his spirit was so troubled that his sleep left him. Verse 3. And the king said to them, I have had a dream, and my spirit is anxious to know the dream. Then the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will give it the interpretation. And the king answered and said to the Chaldeans, my decision is firm. If you do not make known the dream to me and its interpretation, you shall be cut into pieces, and your houses will be made an ash heap. So, here's how it's set. Second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar. What do you suspect is going on in the heart and life of this king of Babylon? Okay, so Nebuchadnezzar is a fairly new king. It's his second year. He kind of came to power like that fast. That wasn't a very good snap, I'm sorry, but that was a snap. Very fast, he came to power. Daddy was in power for a long time. All of a sudden, at the Battle of Carchemish with the Egyptians, he gets word that Daddy died. He has to go back home. And that's when he goes through Jerusalem. He takes Daniel and some of his buddies with him, right? Remember all this? 605 BC. And he becomes king, just like that. His second year, however, something's probably going on in his heart. When you're a king in those days, and you're just new to power, and you're the new kid on the block, and you're the most powerful one, how secure are you in your reign? Let me tell you something. People are gunning for you. You know, if you've ever become number one in something, people want what you got. You know what I'm saying? People were wanting to take Nebuchadnezzar down. He was getting too powerful. He's becoming too influential. In the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, he's starting to feel the pressure of being king. And he has this dream. And he doesn't know what it is. And he's fearful. He's wondering. He's pondering. Does this dream have something to do with my reign? Is this something that I need to be worried about? I have so much to be worried about in the land of Babylon. Do I need this dream to be bogging me down as well? I wish that I had somebody that could tell me about this dream, interpret it for me, because I'm losing sleep over the deal. You ever have something happen to you in life that you just start losing sleep over it? Why do you lose sleep over stuff? Because it's troublesome, it's bothersome, it's making you very anxious, and you start to lose sleep. And Nebuchadnezzar here, it tells us in verse 1, he was so troubled by this dream that his sleep has left him. He can't even sleep anymore. This dream is just causing him so much anguish. And so verse 2 tells us that he calls all the astrologers, the magicians, the sorcerers, all the smart people of the land of Babylon. And you'll notice here that Daniel uses the word Chaldeans once in a while. That slips in. It's just another name for Babylon, okay? It's Babylon. The land of the Chaldeans is the land of Babylon. So don't let that hang you up too much there. And so he brings in these guys. And he wants to know the interpretation, and he tells them that he not only wants the interpretation, but he wants them to also tell him his dream. Now, you guys thought it was kind of funny when I said, tell me what my dream was. And rightfully so. That's kind of ridiculous, isn't it? You don't know what my dream was. So how is it that Nebuchadnezzar can make such a claim that not only does he want to know the interpretation of his dream, but he also wants them to tell him what the dream was? Why do you suppose that's true? Why wouldn't Nebuchadnezzar tell them what the dream was so that they could do their job of interpreting it? Wouldn't that be a lot easier? Wouldn't that make a lot more sense? But Nebuchadnezzar doesn't do that. And it's actually really smart of him to not give the dream. You know why? If I told you what my dream was, and I said, Pam, can you tell me what my dream meant? Here's my dream. It's about flowers. Tell me what my dream is all about. You know what Pam could do? It's about this. Would she be right or would she be wrong?
Probably wrong.
Well, probably right. But you know what? Honestly, we really wouldn't know. Because what if you said, well, the interpretation of that dream isn't going to come to pass for another 50 years? Gosh, we could all be dead by then. How will we know if she's right or wrong? I wish there was a way to verify whether or not the interpretation was sound. You know what? If you could tell me what my dream was and then give me the interpretation of it, how much more likely would I believe you that your interpretation is correct? I'd have a lot more confidence in your ability to interpret my dream if you could also tell me what my dream was. And this is what Nebuchadnezzar's attempting to do. You know what the astrologers, the sorcerers, the soothsayers, you know what they tell Nebuchadnezzar? You're insane. That is not possible. There's no way that could happen. How is it that we could do that? There is nobody on the face of the earth, Nebuchadnezzar, that could possibly do this for you. The astrologers insist that nobody could come up with an interpretation without first knowing the dream. And you know what you do if you want to make King Nebuchadnezzar mad? You tell him that. That'll do it. That'll make him real mad. You know what? Nebuchadnezzar gets so mad. He's so frustrated because remember, Nebuchadnezzar is the king. He's got a kingdom that he has to take care of and provide for. He's supposed to rule over it. And he kind of likes to keep his job. And he's so concerned about this dream that he's losing sleep over it. And he needs to figure this little puzzle out. And he needs to figure it out right now. So he calls the wisest people that he can find in all of his land. And tells them he needs to get this figured out. And he needs to get it figured out now. And they tell him, not going to do it. Can't do it. Nobody could do it, in fact. And it makes him so mad that he's going to kill every one of them until somebody figures it out or they're all dead. And so he starts to kill them one by one by one. And verse 13 tells us this. So this decree went out, and they began killing the wise men, and they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. Time out. What's Daniel and his buddies got to do with this? Daniel's not a Chaldean. Daniel's not a Babylonian. Why is it that they're going to seek out Daniel to kill him? Does anybody remember? Well, last week we looked at the sermon, What's for Supper? And we talked about when Daniel got into the land of the Babylonians, how they radically changed him. They changed his name. They changed his location. They changed his religion. They changed his God. They changed his diet. They changed everything about him. And Daniel tells them, when they finally get to the point where it's like, you know what? We want you to eat the king's delicacies. We are the greatest nation, the greatest empire to have ever been. We have the best food. We've got everything in abundance, and we want to give it to you. And Daniel says, no. I will not eat that. I will not defile my God. I want to eat the vegetables and the water that God wants me to eat. And what happens when Daniel eats those? Remember they had that 10-day test? Is Daniel better or worse? Better. He's better. And you know what the text tells us? In Daniel chapter 1, it says, and these 4 young men, God gave them knowledge and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. Now, at the end of the days, when the king had said that they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar, and the king interviewed them, and among them Among them all, none was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore they served before the king. And in all matters of wisdom and understanding about which the king examined them, he found them to be 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers who were in his realm. So why is it? So Nebuchadnezzar issues this decree that all the astrologers, all the wise men, all the sorcerers, all the soothsayers, all these wise men, they're all going to die if they cannot provide the dream and the interpretation. And now they're going to seek after Daniel. Why? He's 10 times better than the rest of them. And if he can't even come up with this, he's going to die also, and his buddies. Well, that's a problem, isn't it? If you were Daniel and you had this decree sent out that all the wise men are all going to die and you're 10 times better than them, you're probably shaking in your boots. You're probably wondering when your time is going to happen. Because they start killing them. And they're coming for you next. That's the decree of Nebuchadnezzar. That if you cannot come up with the dream and the interpretation, you're going to die. Are you ready? This next step is the dream of Nebuchadnezzar. Verses 14 and 15 we'll read. Then with counsel and wisdom, Daniel answered Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. He answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree from the king so urgent? Then Arioch made the decision known to Daniel. So Daniel, feeling the pinch of this decree of Nebuchadnezzar, he and his friends, after the events of chapter 1, are seen as 10 times better than all the other ones and are therefore subject to death under the king's decree. What is a man like Daniel to do when a king sends a decree after you? Well, what does Daniel do? He does a couple of things. Number one, in verse 16. So Daniel went in and asked the king to give him time that he might tell the king the interpretation. Wow, how brave do you have to be? So Nebuchadnezzar is the strongest, most powerful king in all the land. Babylon is number one on the world scene right now. Nebuchadnezzar, it's king. Daniel, under penalty of death for not providing interpretation as a wise man, says, you know what? I'd like to go talk to him. Boy, that's got to take some bravery and courage, you think? But you know what? Daniel, as a man of God, as somebody who's able to walk upright and do what is right, says, I'm going to go do it. You know, if you can walk before the King of Kings, you know who else you can talk to? Anybody. There isn't anybody that should intimidate you on any level. If you can walk before the King of Kings, you can walk with anybody. And Daniel was able to go right up to Nebuchadnezzar and demand something from him. You think he got it? Did he get it? He got it. What? He got it. And the next thing that Daniel does is the same thing that we should do. Have you ever been in such a place in your life where you were fearful for your life? I have been. I was at a time where the doctors told me that one more day my kidneys were going to shut down and then I would have died. Have you ever been in such a place? Maybe a heart attack, maybe something, maybe you were on the operating table and you stopped breathing. I don't know. Maybe you've experienced something. Maybe you've seen somebody do something. What do you usually do in a time like that? You want people to pray for you. So what does Daniel and his buddies do? They have what we like to call an urgent prayer meeting. So Daniel went into his house, verse 17, and made the decision known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, that they might seek mercies from the God of heaven concerning the secret, so that Daniel and his companions might not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then the secret was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. So Daniel blessed the God of heaven. So who is it, do you think, that gave Nebuchadnezzar this dream? God did it. And if God is able to give Nebuchadnezzar that dream, do you think he can give Daniel the dream as well? And not only can God give Daniel the dream, do you think God can also give Daniel the interpretation to this dream? You betcha. What was it that we're calling this series of Daniel? The man behind the curtain. Somebody's pulling the strings to every part of life, guys. You're not as in control as you think you are. There's somebody behind the scenes for all areas and aspects of life. Good, bad, right, wrong, or indifferent. Whatever you want to look at them or think of them as. God is really ultimately in control of everything that happens, when it happens, why it happens, where it happens, to whom it happens with. God is in control of dreams. He's in control of visions. He's in control of every last little tiniest aspect of life that you've ever endured or will endure. He is in control of the whole kit and caboodle. There's nothing that will ever happen to you that is beyond God's sight or understanding. Nothing takes him by surprise. He knows full well that Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. He knows full well that Nebuchadnezzar is going to kill people if they don't give this interpretation. God is able to give not only Daniel the dream, but he's also able to give Daniel the interpretation to this dream. In verses 20 through 23, God reveals to Daniel not only the dream, but also the interpretation. I'll let you read that for yourself when you get home. Now, knowing these things, Daniel is quick to speak with Arioch, captain of the king's guard, to halt the execution of the king's decree. In verse 25, then Arioch quickly brought Daniel before the king and said thus to him, I have found a man of the captives of Judah who will make known to the king the interpretation. So can you imagine Arioch? Probably, who knows where he was? I don't think that Daniel had a house right next to the king's palace. He probably had to come running. And he runs into the king's palace and he's like, King, let's stop killing everybody here. Can we just stop this for a minute? I'm tired. I found somebody that can finally do exactly what the king has asked for. And now you have my attention. Who is this young man? And where is he? The king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, are you able to make known to me the dream which I have seen and its interpretation? You can just he's like just waiting with bated breath. Is this possible? Did we finally find somebody? I thought you told me that nobody would be able to do this, that there wasn't a single person on the face of the earth that could possibly do this. And you're telling me that you can do it? That's interesting. So Daniel answered, verse 27, in the presence of the king and said, the secret which the king has demanded, the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, and the soothsayers cannot declare to the king. But, verse 28, there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Your dream and the visions of your head upon your bed were these. And he's going to tell him the dream. Verses 31 through 35 is the dream. Are you guys ready? Here it is. All of this setup. We've spent like 20 minutes doing this almost like introductory stuff. But you know what, guys? It was no introduction. It was completely to set up the idea that there's only one person that could come up with this, and it's not Daniel, it's not Arioch, it's not the buddies, it's not you, and it's not me. Who is the only one that can come up with this dream and its interpretation? God, and God alone. And without that kind of introduction, you would have never been able to get to that point, especially Nebuchadnezzar would have never been able to come to this point. So God, interestingly enough, set it up so that we would see him in the middle of it all. And now it's time for the dream. Are you ready? 31 through 35. You, O king, were watching, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose splendor was excellent, stood before you, and its form was awesome. The image's head was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. You watched while a stone was cut out without hands, which struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed together and became like chaff from the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away so that no trace of them was found. And the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. Got it? It's pretty easy. It's a statue. Kind of like the image of a man on some level. It's got a head. It's got arms and a torso. It's got thighs and legs and feet and toes. And each part is made of something different. The head is of gold. And then the next part's silver. And then bronze, thighs and feet, iron, clay. And what's so tough about that? Why is that so disturbing to Nebuchadnezzar? It's just a dream of an image. I mean, it's not like it's moving or terrorizing the neighborhood, or it didn't come out of space. It's not an alien. I mean, some of the stuff that might cause us to lose sleep, I don't understand why this is causing Nebuchadnezzar to lose sleep. It's just an image with different parts. What's so strange or peculiar about this? Well, Nebuchadnezzar had he just knew that it had something to do with kingdoms. And Nebuchadnezzar's so concerned about his kingdom that he was concerned that maybe this had something to do with his kingdom, and is it going to impact him in an adverse sort of way, and is it something, and he just didn't know. That's why he wanted the interpretation of it. Sometimes you have dreams and you're just like, that was a fun dream, and you kind of forget about it. How many dreams have you ever had in your whole life where 10 years later you still know what it was? Like one? Most dreams you forget by the time you put your spoon into your bowl of cereal. You know? Sometimes, though, it sticks with you. And this one really stuck with Nebuchadnezzar because he was concerned about his kingdom. And he knew that this had to do something with his kingdom. He just didn't know what. And that's why he wanted the interpretation. But he didn't just want anybody to just say, well, that statue was just you, Nebuchadnezzar, because you're so awesome. He wanted somebody to be able to interpret it without being told the dream, so that he would know that the interpretation is sure because they knew what the dream was. Did Daniel properly identify his dream? Yes. Yes, he sure did. So, let's look at this again. The dream itself is very simple. The dream is that as a statue. It's the several parts. The first one is the head of gold. Now, this is very important. As we think about the interpretation, which is coming next, you got to get this first. So the head is gold. You know, if you have colors and stuff, if you're coloring while I'm preaching, that's great. That's fine. But now's the time to get your colors out, and we're going to make a picture. I'm not an artist, so I did not do this ahead of time. But you have a head of gold. You've got a chest and arms of silver. You got a belly and thighs of bronze. And then you have legs of iron and feet of clay. And at the end of the dream, a stone, and this is important, that was cut without human hands, struck the image on the feet. And after being struck, the statue was crushed all together and became like chaff and was blown away. And that stone became a great mountain, and it filled the whole earth. So what does this all mean? What does this have to do with anything? Or was this just as meaningless as the universe smelling like turpentine? Which is more important? They both seem kind of pointless at this point. But thankfully, Daniel has the interpretation available for us as well. So the interpretation is verses 37 through 40. And it says this: You, O king, are a king of kings. For the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power. Who gave this to him, by the way? The man pulling all the strings gave it to him. For the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. And wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field and the birds of heaven, he has given them into your hand and has made you ruler over them all. You are this head of gold. But after you shall rise another kingdom inferior to yours, then another, a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks into pieces and shatters everything, and like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break into pieces and crush all the others. Whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom that shall be divided, yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with the ceramic clay. And he goes on. But that is the interpretation. Nebuchadnezzar's dream reveals the fate of the kingdoms of the world at that time of Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian Empire. So first, did you catch the interpretation? The interpretation isn't really that much more complicated than the dream itself, really. First, the head of gold is what? Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon. God gives credit to the Babylonian Empire as being the golden empire of history. The United States is not said to be the golden head of the statue. Now, we like to think we're pretty special, but what is it that the Bible says is the head of gold? Babylon. Don't mix the two up. Second, the chest and arms of silver will be the Medes and the Persian Empire. Now, they're the Medes and Persians because they're two different, but they're working in conjunction, kind of like two arms work in conjunction. Oh, that's fascinating, isn't it? And there's silver. Silver is stronger than gold in terms of strength. You'd have to be pretty strong, by the way, to take out something. But the two arms represents the Medes and the Persians for their empire, but they are inferior as silver is inferior to gold. And by the way, why is it, do you think, that Babylon is gold? You ever thought about that? What made it so special? Yeah, he had the Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world. And yeah, they had some really good things going for him. But I don't know. I was thinking about it. I've been studying this for a while now, trying to be prepared for today. And it was really about this week where I wonder. This is one of these questions I'm going to ask God one day. You have a bunch of questions you're going to ask God someday? I have a bunch of questions, the whole line. I'm just going to interrogate the guy. I hope he's ready. So I've got a lot of questions. One of my questions: why is it that Babylon is the gold one? The United States is pretty fancy, and we do a lot of stuff for Israel. And he who blesses Israel, I will bless. We understand that. Why is the United States the gold one? Here's my answer, and I cannot wait to find out the answer. So, how many of you watch football? I like watching football. I like the Carolina Panthers. It's my team. You know, when they became an expansion team, I didn't have a team that I followed at the time. And I'm like, you know what? Nobody's a Panthers fan. Nobody even knows about them because they're a brand new expansion team. I'm going to adopt that as my team. And so when the Panthers get to the playoffs, sometimes they lose. You know who I root for to win the Super Bowl when the Panthers lose? The team that beat them. Why? If you're going to take out my Panthers, you'd better be pretty fantastic. You know what I mean? You better be pretty awesome. I don't want a dog-like team taking out my beloved Panthers. So if you're taking out my Panthers, you'd better be amazing. What's that got to do with Babylon's and Israel? You know that Israel was the apple of God's eye, right? And Israel's pretty special to God. So if you're going to take out Israel, which the Babylonians did, if you're going to take out Israel, you'd better be something pretty special. And he was. He was the head of gold. Now, is that why? I don't know. That's my question. Is that why Babylon is the head of gold? Because they took out Israel? And if you're going to take out Israel, you better be pretty amazing? Is that why? I'd like to think so, but I don't know if I can prove it. But anyway, Babylon is the head of gold one way or the other. The Medes and the Persians are the silver part. Third, the belly and thighs of bronze are the legions of Alexander the Great and the Greek Empire. Bronze is stronger than silver and gold, but again, not as valuable as either of them. Fourth, the legs of iron refer to the Roman Empire. Iron is even stronger yet, but not a precious metal like bronze, silver, or gold. Unfortunately, in the Olympics, we don't have a fourth place where they get an iron medal. You know what I mean? You don't look that way. Rome will eventually be broken into two kingdoms. And how many of you know your history? If you don't know your history, you're going to know your history by the time we're done with Daniel, all right? You're going to know probably about as much about history as you do about the Bible when we're done with Daniel. Anyway, Rome will be eventually broken into two kingdoms, as shown in the dream, having how many legs? We usually have two legs as people. Ultimately, Rome will become a confederation of many kingdoms, like the toes, which are iron and clay, a mixture of weakening material. And how many kingdoms did Rome end up having at the end? You have one guess, and if you don't know, it's written in here. The stone, not cut with human hands, which results in a mountain, is seen as God's kingdom coming to the earth. The idea that Jesus is often referred to as a stone and that a mountain is seen as a kingdom. Therefore, this stone is God setting up his kingdom over the earth when all the other kingdoms have run their course. So, there's a lot going on here with this, and this is where, when we talk about prophecy and we don't know a lot of things, and really all we can say is that this is what happens. So the million-dollar question is, where's the United States? Where's this kingdom at? I thought after Rome, this stone was going to come, and the stone didn't come. Why didn't the stone come? And is the stone coming at some point? And you know what? If you would like to ask me that question in about 5 minutes, you are more than welcome to. But all I'm going to say on this official level is that this is what this says. And we're going to move on. Much more could be said, though, but that will be off the record. So that's the dream. That's it. That's what we've been waiting for. This image of the statue and the interpretation of it. That's the dream of Daniel chapter 2. So how does Nebuchadnezzar then feel about this? Verses 46 through 49, this decision of Nebuchadnezzar. He's going to decide to do something now. He's just so interested in this. Then King Nebuchadnezzar, verse 46, fell on his face prostrate before Daniel and commanded that they should present an offering and incense to him. Why? He did what everybody else said was impossible. Impossible. We can't give you an interpretation and your dream. You need to first give us your dream. Nobody can do this. Until Daniel comes along. And Daniel, as a man of God, is able to do what nobody else can do. And Nebuchadnezzar is in shock. The king answered Daniel and said, truly, your God is the God of gods, the Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets, since you could reveal this secret. Boom! That's pretty cool. The king of the head of gold admits that God is the one that pulled this one off. Wow. Nebuchadnezzar can't hardly believe Daniel knew. How did Nebuchadnezzar know that Daniel knew? Because since Daniel knew what the dream was, he could be sure that the interpretation was correct as well. Daniel lifts God up as the one who is the revealer of secrets. Do you remember in verse 6? Nebuchadnezzar made a promise. He says this, however, if you tell the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts, rewards, and great honor. Therefore, tell me the dream and its interpretation. That's all you got to do. Well, Daniel did it. Is Nebuchadnezzar going to live up to his word? Well, he's already presented him offerings and incense to him. And verse 48, then the king promoted Daniel and gave him great gifts and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief administrator over all the wise men of Babylon. Wow. Remember, I told you that Daniel was going to be number 2 in the land. How did he do it? He just did it. Daniel was able to do this because God is the one behind the scenes, pulling the strings, making it all work, getting it all done. Wow. However, Daniel doesn't stop there. With God's help, he is able to tell Nebuchadnezzar all these things, and he gets this promotion. You think he forgot about his friends, though? Daniel didn't forget about his friends. He says, he petitions to the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon, but Daniel sat in the gate of the king. So in Babylon, there were many provinces, and each province was governed by what was called a satrap. And you're going to want to know the term satrap next week. When Daniel was rewarded for interpreting the dream, Nebuchadnezzar made good on his promise to promote him. Daniel was not going to forget his friends, though, and Nebuchadnezzar honored Daniel by making his friends satraps among other provinces as well. All because God honored what Daniel was doing. Daniel was doing exactly what he needed to be doing. He was honoring God, and in turn, God was able to honor him. So what are the things that we can learn? What are some other results of Daniel interpreting this dream? There's 4 different results here. Number 1, Daniel was brought into prominence in the court of Nebuchadnezzar. He's made second in the land, and that's something, and it's a position that he's going to hold throughout the course of the time of the Babylonian Empire. And in fact, when the Medo-Persians comes along, he's going to be second in that land as well, but we'll get there. The dream served as a warning to Nebuchadnezzar that he is not invincible. So he was right. Nebuchadnezzar was concerned about his kingdom and being king. Was he wrong to fear that? No. And Daniel, in interpreting the dream, reveals to him that there is coming a day, Nebuchadnezzar, where you're going down. The dream showed Daniel, his buddies, and the other exiles that God is still in control. And most importantly, Nebuchadnezzar is introduced to God. How many of us here need to be introduced to that God who's able to pull the strings and take care of everything that happens in our lives? I hope you learned something today from Daniel chapter 2. Let's pray.